In this video, we'll be taking a look at the 2026 governor's map based on the latest polls from every single race. Republicans currently control 27 of the nation's 50 governorships, and in order for Democrats to win, they need to win 21 of the 36 races that will be on next November. We have a ton of new polling data from key states like California, Michigan, and Ohio, and today we'll be filling in the map based on the latest numbers. And so we're going to begin by filling in the solid states races where either party will win by 15 percentage points or more. Starting off with the safe blue states, we have just three. The first being Hawaii, the second Connecticut, and the third Massachusetts, where we do have one poll from earlier this year with Maura Healey, the incumbent Democratic governor, leading by 25 points against Mike Kennelly. Maura Healey was elected back in 2022 and is on track to win a second term. Massachusetts is one of the most liberal states in the country. And so these are the only three safe blue states on the entire map. Moving on now to the solid Republican states, we actually have 13 of them. I'm going to start off in Nevada. This is a governorship that Republicans picked up in 2022 with the election of Joe Lombardo over the incumbent Democrat at the time, Steve Sisolak. This was a big shock. Republicans did incredibly well in the Silver State. And now looking ahead to 2026, Joe Lombardo leads by 21 points according to a poll released a few years ago against Democrat Attorney General Aaron Ford. Obviously, Democrats are going to do better than this, but based on the data that we have right now, Nevada will be solid Republican. According to the odds on Kalshi, the GOP has a 2-in-3 chance of retaining the governorship here. Nevada has seen a significant shift to the right over the last few years, with Trump winning the state as a Republican for the first time in 20 years in 2024. And so it does seem like at this point, Joe Lombardo is on track to win a second term in the governor's mansion. Nevada will be safe red. The GOP will also take neighboring Idaho, as well as Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, Alabama, South Carolina, Vermont, New Hampshire, and finally Tennessee, where Marsha Blackburn leads by 21 points against Jerry Green, the Democratic frontrunner. Marsha Blackburn is a current member of the U.S. Senate. After serving a term and a half, she has decided to run for the governorship, and she will very likely win. And so with all of these safe red states now filled in, Republicans take an early lead with 13 to the Democrats' 3. Democrats, though, do have quite a few likely states, and we're going to begin out west with California, which uses an open primary system, which essentially means that every single candidate, no matter their party, will be placed onto one ballot in June, and then in November of 2026, we will only see the top two candidates from that June primary on the ballot. And so there have been times where both candidates were Democrats. That could happen in 2026, but right now the top three candidates are Democrat Katie Porter, followed by Republican Steve Hilton and Chad Bianco. Katie Porter is a former member of the House of Representatives. Meanwhile, according to the betting markets on Kalshi, there is actually another Democrat that could potentially enter the race, and that is Senator Alex Padilla. Padilla became a senator because he was appointed to fill the vacancy left by Kamala Harris when she became vice president. And so, of course, Gavin Newsom is term limited. He's not going to be able to run for a third term. However, right now, based on the data, Katie Porter is the favorite, and on aggregate, Democrats lead by 14.9%. So the Golden State will be placed into the likely blue column. Up in Oregon, Tina Kotek is wildly unpopular, but it's still a blue state. She barely won back in 2022, defeating Christine Drazan, her Republican opponent, by less than 4 points. In 2026, she will likely fare slightly better, so Oregon will be likely blue. In Colorado and New Mexico, we'll see two new governors as Jared Polis and Michelle Lujan Grisham are term limited. In Colorado, it's going to be Michael Bennet, a 3-term U.S. Senator. And in New Mexico, the favorite is Deb Haaland, Biden's Secretary of the Interior. And so both these races will also be likely Democratic, as will Illinois, where J.B. Pritzker is running for a third term. He is a potential 2028 contender for the Democratic primary, but for now, he is running for a third term as governor of Illinois, so the state will be likely blue. He will probably not win by more than 15, but it's still a race where Republicans are unlikely to come out on top. And so these likely states will be decided by margins of 5 to 15 points. They're going to be slightly more competitive than the safe ones, but one party still does have a clear edge. And so moving on up now to Michigan, Democrats do lead slightly here with Jocelyn Benson 5 points ahead of Republican John James. John James is a very good candidate on the Republican side. He almost won the Senate seat in Michigan in 2020 against incumbent Senator Gary Peters. It was a surprisingly close race, and John James will be able to pull off a strong performance again next year. On the Democratic side, the front runner is Jocelyn Benson, and looking at the betting markets, Republicans have a 23% chance, Democrats at 68%. There's also an independent candidate, Mike Dugan. He is polling at around 20%. So it is a three-way race, and that in many ways could benefit John James and the Republicans, but we will just have to wait and see as we get new data from the Wolverine state. But for now, based on the numbers we have, the state is barely likely blue. Pennsylvania, though, is not going to be nearly as competitive. Josh Shapiro is on track to win a second term after being elected by nearly 15 back in 2022. The Keystone State will be likely blue, and so will the Empire State of New York, where Kathy Hochul is running for a second full term. She leads by 13.3% against her Republican opponent, Elise Stefanik. Kathy Hochul became governor after the resignation of Andrew Cuomo in 2021. She did not perform too well in 2022, defeating Lee Zeldin by just 6 points. This race is going to get more competitive in the coming months, but based on the data right now, Democrats are ahead by 13.3. The betting markets, though, do tend to disagree here a bit, as Republicans have a 20% chance of winning the governorship, according to Kalshi. That is quite high. That is a 1 in 5 chance that New York will be governed by a Republican come 2027. But for now, based on the data, New York will be placed into the likely Democratic column as well. And continuing on further up into the Northeast and New England, in Rhode Island, Dan McKee is on track to win a second full term. He's not very popular. He only became governor after Gina Raimondo was appointed Biden's Secretary of Commerce, but he will likely be able to fend off a Republican challenger. Rhode Island will be likely blue. Maine will be likely for the Dems as well. Janet Mills will be term limited. She may actually run for the Senate seat against Susan Collins. But for now, we don't know who the Democratic and Republican nominees are going to be yet, although Democrats do come into this race with a baseline advantage. And then in Maryland, we have polling data here showing Wes Moore, the incumbent Democrat, leading Larry Hogan by 14 points. This is going to be a very interesting race. Wes Moore is the incumbent governor elected in 2022 after Larry Hogan left office. He is a former two-term Republican governor of Maryland. He's very popular. He won re-election in 2018 by a pretty wide margin, 12 points for a GOP candidate in a state as blue as Maryland. I mean, in 2024, Maryland voted for Kamala Harris by 29 points, and this is considered a pretty poor performance for Democrats nationwide. So Maryland electing a Republican governor is a pretty big deal, and it's an even bigger deal if he's reelected after 4 years. So Larry Hogan is the best choice for Republicans to nominate, and looking at the betting market odds, he has a 20% chance of winning, according to Kalshi. Meanwhile, Wes Moore is ahead at 84, and based on the numbers so far, the state is going to be the final likely state on the Democratic side. Moving on now to the likely Republican states, we'll begin in Georgia, where Brian Kemp will be term limited. He will not be able to run for a third term. We don't really know who the nominees are going to be yet on either side, but ultimately Republicans are the favorites to come out on top. The Peach State will be likely red, and so will Iowa. Kim Reynolds is not running for re-election here. She was able to, but she announced that she would not be seeking a third term. And just like in Georgia, we don't know who the nominees are going to be yet. although we do have some numbers from Alaska, which shows Republican Nancy Dahlstrom defeating Tom Begich by a 12-point margin. Nancy Dahlstrom is the current lieutenant governor of Alaska, serving with Mike Dunleavy, and she is likely to become the state's next top executive. And finally, we have the first flip on the map, and that will be in Kansas, where Laura Kelly will not be able to seek a third term. Laura Kelly won as a Democrat in 2018 and was reelected as a Democrat in 2022. It was quite an impressive performance from the Kansas Democratic Party. But with her now out of the picture, Republicans are likely to take the state back. According to the odds on Kalshi, the GOP has a 76% chance of taking the seat, Democrats at just 34%. And so Kansas will be likely red, and this will be the first flip on the map going from blue to red. And so we're now left with the 5 most competitive gubernatorial races. We're going to begin up in the Midwest. All of these races are going to be lean or tilt. Lean races will be decided by margins of 1 to 5%. Tilt races, of course, will be decided by less than 1. And so beginning up in Minnesota, Tim Walz is seeking re-election to a third term. Scott Jensen is likely to be his Republican challenger, and Tim Walz only leads by 5 points, according to the only poll that we have from the state so far. The betting markets on Kalshi give Republicans a 22% chance of winning. Tim Walz is certainly less popular now than he was before he ran for the vice presidency alongside Kamala Harris. Tim Walz failed as the nominee, and he likely does not have a political future outside of Minnesota, so really running for governor is the only thing he can do. Scott Jensen was his challenger back in 2022. He actually lost by nearly 8 points. He's probably going to perform better this time around, and so Minnesota will be the first lean state on the map, and it will be lean for the Democrats. We also have a very competitive race in Arizona where Kari Lake lost in 2022 to Katie Hobbs. This was a race Republicans should have won, but Kari Lake was not the right nominee at the time. And so Katie Hobbs, in a surprise victory, came out on top by just under 1%. Looking at the polling for 2026, Democrats now have the incumbency advantage. That is why Katie Hobbs leads Karen Taylor Robson by 4.6%. Robson likely would have been able to defeat Katie Hobbs 4 years ago, but we are going to see this race start to become more competitive over the next few months after Robson officially becomes the Republican nominee. She has a very good chance of winning here, 1 in 3, Democrats at 2 in 3. In terms of betting market odds, this is not a huge statistical difference. And so Katie Hobbs is the incumbent governor elected a few years ago. Karen Taylor Robson was a former member of the Arizona Board of Regents, and she should have been the candidate in 2022 if Republicans wanted to win. But this time around, she will be the nominee, and she will have a very good chance at taking the governorship back. Of course, before Katie Hobbs, it was 8 years of Republican Doug Ducey, but based on the polling data right now, Arizona will also be lean blue. Republicans, though, are leading in Florida. Byron Donalds is ahead of David Jolly by 4.3%, although ultimately Democrats don't really stand a chance here. I mean, look at 2022. Ron DeSantis was reelected by a 19-point margin. Byron Donalds is on track to become the next governor of Florida. David Jolly is a former member of the House. He is also a former Republican that has now become a Democrat. And looking at the odds on Kalshi, Republicans have a whopping 94% chance of winning this race. The polls don't really reflect the true reality in Florida. This is no longer a competitive state. Donald Trump won it by 13 points over Kamala Harris. Florida will be lean red on the map, but ultimately David Jolly is not going to get even close to Byron Donalds. And now with 2 races left, both of them in the Midwest, we have polling data from Ohio, which shows Vivek Ramaswamy 3.8% ahead of Amy Acton. Initially, Acton was actually leading here, but Ramaswamy has since pulled ahead, and he is on track to become the next governor of the Buckeye State, succeeding Mike DeWine. He gained national recognition on the Republican side in 2024 when he ran for the Republican nomination. He did not win that, obviously, but he has become a major name in GOP circles, and he will likely become the next governor of one of the largest states in the country. He will likely defeat Amy Acton, the director of the Ohio Department of Health. Looking at the betting markets, Republicans have a 71% chance of winning this race. And so Ohio will be the final lean state on the map. It's going to be lean red. And finally, we're left with just Wisconsin, where Tony Evers is the incumbent. He will not be able to run for a third term. He won very narrowly against Tim Michels in 2022, defeating his Republican challenger by just over 3 points. With Republicans doing better in Wisconsin than they have previously, Wisconsin used to be generally a pretty liberal state, but just look at the presidential results from 2024. Trump wins the state against Kamala Harris. The GOP has a good chance at flipping the governorship, especially because it does like the flip-flop between parties. It was Scott Walker, the Republican, before Tony Evers, and in 2026, I do believe that a Republican will come out on top by a narrow margin in the state. Wisconsin, I'm going to place into the tilt Republican category. And so this means that Democrats were unable to win the 21 governorships they needed to win in order to win a majority of executive mansions in the country. And so this was the map that we had before: Democrats at 23, Republicans at 27. But with the flips that we saw in both Kansas and Wisconsin, the new map will be 29-21 in favor of the GOP after they take Kansas and Wisconsin. This is quite a significant shift. Republicans are on track to win nearly 60% of all governorships in the country. And so that will be it for this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below which gubernatorial races you're watching, and make sure you subscribe for more content just like this leading up to the 2026 midterms.